chat about the philosophy of consciousness, and today I'm going to talk to you about Descartes, because we can't really do this without mentioning Descartes. And though he's considered to have created the modern problem, that's a little bit harsh, because he did identify something that's really, really important. And that is, for two things to be the same, they're going to have every property in common. So what do I mean by that? Well, a property is something that an object possesses in order to be that object. So I had the properties of being female, the properties of having my height, colour of eyes, colour of hair, that sort of thing. So now when we talk about it, I've got two things here, and they're very, very similar. But they're not identical, because of course they have different properties, and one of them is a colour. This one's yellow, this one's turquoise. They have different colours. So of course, though they're very similar, they're not identical, and in not being identical, they're not one and the same thing. Well, that's fine, that makes a lot of sense. So now let's have this thing. I've only got one of these. Now this is single because every property it has is not shared with anything else. It is purely what it is. But then if I bring this one, now we've got two. Now they look identical. They look to be exactly the same, but they're not one and the same thing. They're not identical in having every property in common, because the one they've got difference is where they're located in space. This one's here, this one's here. That's why we've got two instead of one. Now what Descartes does is he says that mind and body cannot be considered one and the same thing. And we know in the modern age we tend to consider them, well, there's some theorists that say they are one and the same thing. And he says, no, they can't be, because they don't have every property in common. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because my body is physical, it's in space, and by being an object, I can cut it up, I can break it up, I can do different things with it. I can move it, and 1 minute's here, 1 minute's there. My mind is different. Again, as I've often said, close your eyes and try and experience mind, and you'll realise that you can't cut it up. It isn't an object to be cut up like a body. And therefore, mind and body have very distinct properties. In fact, for Descartes, he said they have no properties in common. And one of the most important differences, which is why he's considered to have in a way created the modern problem of consciousness, is that he recognised that mind is subjective. You can't access my mind. But the body is objective. You can access it. It's public. Mind is private. The body is public. So there is no way these two can be the same. If they can't be the same, then they must be different. Okay. So what we have with this idea of them being different is that in a living human being, mind and body interact. So I'm alive, and I'm made up of two things. I'm made up of my mind, and I'm made up of my body. An interesting thing is it's my mind that is the most important, because it's my mind that is directing my body to do things. I'm going to go and walk into the sitting room, and my body's going to take me there. Now it's taking me there because my mind, which is the centre of my desires, my thoughts, my hopes, is telling my body to do that. And so I'm going there. Yeah? And I'm going there because I'm not very good at standing still, and I like moving around. Okay, fine, we've got that. Now, the point about this is that the mind is not merely this thing that has desires, dreams, hopes. It is also, for Descartes, something that we call supremely rational. Actually, it's a bit dark in here, so I'm going to go back to the kitchen. I mean, it's one of those cold winter days, so I'm going back into the kitchen. And okay, so my mind has a desire to go back into the kitchen, and it's taking my body there. But my mind has another element to it, and that is that it reasons. It's intellectual. And this is really, really important for Descartes. So my mind can do all the philosophy, the rationalism, the thinking, can do mathematics. I can't do mathematics. It isn't very good at maths. But, I mean, I can close my eyes and do 2 + 3 = 5, so I can do it a little bit. But it's that ability to reason. Now, this takes us to something that is a bit problematic, I think, is that if you're going to identify consciousness with this ability to reason, it looks like, according to Descartes, there's only one species that has it, which is human beings. So we might say a plant doesn't have consciousness now. We'll talk about that under another lecture. And you might say, yeah, that's a blinding glimpse of an obvious that a plant doesn't have consciousness. But what about the animals? Now, I often look after next door's dog, and she's a sweetheart, but she's not here with me. And I know that Rosie, this beautiful black Labrador, full of love and affection, can't do mathematics. She can't reason. But does that mean she doesn't have consciousness? Well, for Descartes, yeah, because she's really a machine. That's a bit harsh, but she doesn't have what we have. And I think that is a little bit of a problem. Certainly a problem I have with some of Descartes' ideas. Now, the other thing that's really important is how does mind and body relate to each other? Now, I think this becomes a crucial issue with Descartes. I mean, there's lots of issues. Some of his arguments are problematic. But this is a difficult one because in a living human being, if it's my mind directing my body to do things, then my mind and my body have to come into contact with each other. But how does something non-physical come into actual contact with something physical? How does it work? Now, Descartes said it happened in the pineal gland in the brain. Okay, biologically he's wrong, but we're not going to penalise him for having the wrong biology, because, you know, we are talking the 17th century. But we are going to penalise him for something that is just slightly odd. So I'm going to show you something. I'm going to go to the fridge door because I think it's going to be the easiest way to see it, because otherwise I'm not very good with these machines. Now here on the fridge door, my hand, my physical hand, yeah, is coming into contact with this object here. Well, let's do this one. Now this object is moving because my finger is pushing it, yeah? It's come into physical contact with it, and that's why it's able to move, yeah? Because of that. Well, that's fine. But imagine this is my body and this is my mind, but my mind is nowhere. So how is my mind going to move it? It's going to go, ooh, move, 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 move. Well, it's not going to do it, is it? And it's not going to do it with the body. Well, it's not easy to see how it could do it with the body. And this is known as a problem of interaction, and is possibly the one thing that has Descartes' theory falling apart. In fact, in his own time, Descartes realised this was a problem. And he offered suggestions to ways to resolve it that aren't really that successful. And people that wanted to hold on to his ideas that the mind and body are two separate things, but realised there was a problem of interaction, came up with some really, really bizarre ideas, really, really crazy ones in a way. I mean, you can see what they were trying to do, but it didn't work. So I'm going to leave that there. And in the next chat, we'll talk about something else. Anyway, thanks. Bye.